My name is Benny Erez, and this is an honor to go down memory lane and speak to you, Philip, and go back and talk about some things that happened in the past and commemorate our parents by doing this. My father left Germany in 1940, I believe, or 1939, and went to Israel. And you could tell about your mother. And somehow they are connected to each other. And we can go and tell the story of both families, how we are connected and how we found ourselves talking to each other again after so many years. Because it was, yeah.
I figured the other day it was something like 70 years where there was no connection. I mean, first of all, I never had never had knowledge about your family, but our parents did meet during both of our lifetimes. But somehow or other it never registered. Your father died, and then yeah. So anyway, after 70 years, maybe it should be if you want to tell me the story about how it came to be that you contacted me.
Yeah, I could start from way back. My father died when I was 5. And I do have memories of him, very vivid memories. I remember, especially I remember smells and all kinds of other things that relates to my father. He died apparently from some kind of a heart failure, heart blockage. I was very, very young. My mother was pregnant with twins at the time. They were born less than 6 months after he died, or something like that. And we were just the two of us. And when the twins were born, we were, for about 2 years, we were just the small family on a kibbutz in Israel, which the kibbutz was helping very much to do all kinds of things to help us. They were very kind. My mother was remarried 3 years or so after my father died, with a good friend of hers. And my father was kind of left in memories because she was trying to live a new life and not commemorate my father. So the family was devoted to the new father. His name was Menachem, and he came from another kibbutz. He was an American. My brother and sister never met my father, but I always had something missing. Because I was 5, I had memories of him, and for many, many years, things kind of linger. We moved to the United States for 3 years when I was 16, and that was sort of the beginning of my search for connection to my father, my real father, my biological father, which started with looking for my father's brother, who we knew something about, we had a whole bunch of letters from him to my father. So I did a big search. At that time, the internet became available, and it was possible to do a lot of searches. So I really, really started to look for connections to my uncle. And it was very convoluted way of finding him. I did many hours on the computer. Finally, I discovered that actually I had a cousin. Fortunately, my mother kept some letters from my uncle, and I read all the letters. Some of them were in German, so I had them translated to English. And through those letters, I realized that, yes, my uncle lived in California somewhere, in around the Bay Area, and he had a daughter. And I did as many searches as I could, and finally I found my cousin.
So I was always interested, first of all, just to butt in. I never knew you had a series of letters. I always thought it was very few. We should come back to this later, but I am curious as to what kind of stuff he was saying. But I think the connection with me was that one of the letters mentioned my family, and this was the thing that triggered that.
Exactly. So in one of the letters, my uncle is writing, and we should probably present that letter, and I have the translation of the letter to English. He's talking about your uncle and your aunt, but he never mentioned your mother. But he mentions the Rothschilds, and that struck with me. That struck I guess, curiosity. Who are those Rothschilds? Because, yeah, and also my cousin always mentions, I heard so much about the Rothschild. Her father, which is a story by itself, he ended up being a drug addict, and I traced his life as well through the internet, and found his grave, and actually went to see it. But that's
I didn't realize that you'd seen that. So this is, just to clarify, this is you're talking about your cousin who you'd found through another search. I mean, that's a second story that's very interesting, that you gathered from these letters that he lived in California, and gathered that he had a daughter, and then undertook to try and find who this was.
Yes.
So,
actually, my cousin was a writer, and she wrote this little booklet of stories, and we should maybe include that sometime. She wrote stories, and she has I don't know if we can, actually we can't see her picture right now, but I'll be able to show.
I will put these up on the website. This is an interesting part of things. But this is really the initial thing between yourself and myself was that you found mention of the Rothschilds,
I
and
found
and then you undertook to find out who the hell these people were.
yes, who the hell these people were. I was in actually. We were invited to a my father's family Stolpersteiner event in Bad Homburg, and
Just for people who don't know what it is, this is a movement in Germany who are memorializing people who were displaced or killed by the Nazis during the war. And I don't really know the story. They contacted you out of the blue to suddenly say, we have a record of your family and we'd like to make a memorial. How did that happen?
so not exactly, but almost. We have some friends. We lived in Maryland at the time, and we had some friends, and a couple from Frankfurt, Germany, contacted them and started to do a family search for them about their mother. Her name is Miriam. She is a good friend of my wife. And through the fact that Miriam's mother was a Nazi Holocaust survivor, they did a search on her family. These are volunteers. He's a lawyer and she's a member of the Stolpersteiner movement in Frankfurt, and they did the initial search after they knew about my family as well, and we got a nice booklet from them telling us all kinds of information that was really, really eye-opening for me, where my grandfather was, when he died, when my grandmother died, and she actually committed suicide just before transport. And she was actually buried outside the cemetery in Frankfurt. So no way I could find out this information.
Did you even know where your father came from before that time? Did you know which town he came from?
I knew that he was born in Bad Homburg. That stuff my mother actually told me.
Yeah.
But that's all I knew, and I was very, very curious to know more about this whole story. I was basically dying to know more about my background, because it was a black box, so to speak, and I was eager to find any information about the family, about who I am and where I came from.
I mean, was this just natural curiosity? I mean, can you distinguish whether, not knowing something about your background makes you feel empty, or the second thing is to say, well, I'm not empty, but I really want to know because it's exciting or interesting. Is there any way you can distinguish one of?
I felt like something is missing. I felt like maybe there is some relatives that I could still talk to. Maybe there's somebody on that side of the family that I don't know, that I would like to be connected to, because I had connection to my adopted father, but that wasn't enough for me. I needed to know something about my biological father, because he basically disappeared out of my life when I was 5. And there was nothing. My mother did not know much about him, not very much. And all I had is these letters from his brother, and that's it.
So the letters from him, so we may as well put names to these. Your father was Edmund, and Edward was his brother.
Right.
And the story was that, as I understood it, was that Edward that even to the present day, that there's no knowledge about when Edward left or how he left, but somehow or other he left and went to the USA, and
Well, I
identified later with these letters, or is there more to it than that?
yeah, I did actually found the boat manifest of him when he left Germany, but it's still a mystery why he left and how he left. Some people tell me that possibly he left because he was harassed by the police or by the Gestapo, and either was in prison and was let go, and he had to leave in order to stay alive, like many others, like your family. So anyway, he ended up in New York for a while, and then moved to California. He got drafted to the army and got released because of medical reasons. He got married to a non-Jewish woman that hated him, and had 2 children. One was mentally retarded, and the other one was this cousin that I met, who her name was Marianne, and I traced her down, and I found her, and that's where the curiosity started. She was telling me all the stories about the brothers that she heard from her father, and I had to continue searching. And let's get back to the story of how Stolpersteiner.
Introduce the Stolperstein, and also the what you knew about your father. I mean, he was part of the Jewish Brigade. There must be a picture that you built up of him, be above and beyond, not necessarily his roots, but what kind of a guy he was as you knew him before you started the search.
I always regarded him as a hero, and many stories about him. He joined the British Brigade. He was also
Jewish Brigade.
Jewish Brigade. Under
controlled by the British, or was it?
Yes, it was a unit controlled by the British Army that is volunteers from, at that time, Palestine, that ended up being transferred from Palestine at the time directly to Italy. Some of them actually fought in Africa against Rommel, but my father joined the campaign in Italy, and they went all the way up to Germany. And after the war, when the war was over in 1945, they organized a underground illegal immigrations for Jews that came back from the camps. And I heard many stories from people and from my mother about his life in Germany. He actually stayed over in Germany for, I think, 3 years after the war.
I think on the letters that we can see that he was there for quite some time after the end of the war, as talks about still being in the military. So this was the time when this happened. There's a lot of information about the Jewish Brigade on YouTube videos, documentaries about this.
Yes.
So this was something that I think you mentioned that you grew up and you met people who were rescued. This was basically escorting people. Was it taking British military vehicles and using them to help transport a bunch of people to the Alps and carrying
Yeah,
them over the mountains?
the unit was divided into two. The regular unit that worked with the British, and half of the unit was clandestinely bringing people over the Alps, walking for miles from Austria to Italy, and then taking on boats. And most of them actually were captured in mid-sea and were taken to Cyprus.
So these were people who were in. Well, presumably, if you were Jew and you were still anywhere around in Europe, you had either been in a camp or you at least you were displaced one way or the other. But these people, you're saying that many of them didn't make it to Palestine at the time, and those who did, since you grew up on a kibbutz, what happened? The people that you met later in life, did they end up on? I mean, in those days it wasn't Israel, so it was. What would you do? You might end up going to live in a city, or you'd end up in a kibbutz. Was there the people that you met? Were they urban people or kibbutzniks?
Well, depends. A lot of them at the time, the cities were not well developed. It was much easier to be incorporated into a kibbutz. So a lot of them, I can tell a story about my father. The Jewish brigade was, the British caught the idea that they're smuggling Jews across the Alps, and they wanted to make a stop of it, so they decided that they're going to send the Jewish brigade back to Palestine. But the Jewish brigade wanted to continue doing their work in Europe. So what they decided to do is to have about 100 to 200 people that will stay behind. And in order to do that, they will have to do something rather not ordinary. So what they did is they had a double for each individual who stayed behind. So my father chose a young guy that looked a little bit like him, the height and a little bit the background, came from a certain place. They sat together for many, many hours, and he drilled to him his name, his father's and mother's name, his school background, and what he came from, what kibbutz in Israel. And it basically was a double. This
guy that he trained with was not in the army.
Not in the army.
But
was
he would pretend. And so, I mean, but do you know how? I mean, was he just somebody hanging around, a Jewish guy who was prepared, or somebody from Israel who would come to Germany to pretend to be him?
No. He was from a DP camp, a Jew from Europe that never made it to Israel, but he became a so-called a British soldier again, or and took the uniform from my father, took all his papers from my father. He joined the unit. First they traveled to Egypt, to Cairo, and then they traveled to Israel or to Palestine. He actually ended up on my kibbutz because that was an easy way for him to assimilate into the society. He's at the time he had a name, Edmund Ackerman, and he became Edmund Ackerman.
Yeah.
And-
So
and-
your father was stateless at that point as well. I mean, he was just a guy wandering around Europe in the mess of the World War II with no name and no papers, or unless except that he was known by the Jewish Brigade people that they knew who he was and they would.
They had false papers at the time. They had false papers that allowed them to stay around. He stayed for another 2 years in Europe, organizing, and then at some point he came, before 48, I think it was 47. He or 40 at the end of 47, he ended up back in Israel. There's a story about that, which is rather interesting. He comes off the boat in Haifa with a false paper, of course. His name was, I don't forget his name. And he calls a taxi, and he tells the taxi to take him to Kibbutz Ma'abarot, to my home, his home. But he played around a joke on the driver that he's a new immigrant that doesn't know anything, and talked to him in Yiddish, talked to him, not in Hebrew, obviously. But when he got to the kibbutz, he told him the direction, how to go. And the driver was a little bit, misunderstood. And then he got out of the taxi, and everybody saw him on the kibbutz, and hugs and kisses, and so the driver didn't know anything to think about, so it was a kind of a surprise. Yeah. Anyway, so that story was told to me. I wasn't there, but members of the kibbutz told me the story about my father.
So the scenario was that you were invited to come for a memorial by Stolperstein Group, which was what year was that?
We met when we were in Germany for a year, me and my wife. So we were invited by two wonderful people, Hako and Gisla, who actually did this search for us of our family, and also did the search for, now we're going back to the story, they did the search for our friend Miriam as well. Her mother was also a Holocaust survivor that actually left in a kinder transport to England and ended up in the US, but her parents stayed back in Germany and didn't make it. So they did a search for them, and then we connected to the same people, to Gisla and Hako, and they did a little search for us. And because they were in Frankfurt and not in Bad Homburg, the program for looking for Holocaust survivors from Bad Homburg was delayed a little bit, and the group in Bad Homburg was formed slightly later, and I don't know exactly when. We can ask Mr. Wolfram when it took place, but I believe that they did several Stolpersteiner meetings, and they decided to do one for our family as well. And I got a phone call from Wolfram one day telling me that he got all the information from our friends, Gisela and Hako McIntyre, and he would like to start the same procedure for our family. And that's where it started. That's how we got invited.
So you were invited, and you developed a perception of this life that you knew nothing about. And I don't know if you know, it's obviously if you can characterize what you now felt you knew about your father's early life. You know, it's clearly something or other in a way was irrelevant. First of all, because he was gone when you were young, and secondly, because it didn't really make much, it didn't give any particular influence on your later life. But but I am curious. So out of nearly nothing, you've lived in Germany a little bit. You know, it's one of those things. You go to Bad Homburg and there's no trace of anything. Yes, there's the cemetery, and you get shown around a few things and saying this is where your ancestors lived. But how did it feel at that point to be checking out this place? Was it
Yeah,
personal, or was it kind of abstract at first?
no, very personal, because I developed a sort of a notion about who are my grandparents. I was told by some people that lived on a kibbutz that knew my father, that they actually met my grandparents, and I never had a grandparents. So to me, to learn something about them, it was a sort of revelation.
Well, you also mentioned you had this photo album. So again,
Yes.
this thing started out. I think this maybe it'll show. Oh yeah, it does show. Yeah, we've got this background blurring thing on, which is not gonna. It's gonna blur the album if you show it, but
Yeah.
we can feature a couple of pages of that.
Later
So-
on, yeah.
Yeah, so this thing lived in your life as some kind of a thing in the shelf, or you looked at these pictures and thought, "What's the story behind this?" How did that feel?
So when we were in Germany, it occurred to me that I can do this search, because I already knew my cousin. I already knew a little bit stories about what she was telling me, and I started to put the picture together a little bit. But it was still a mystery. Who are my grandparents? Who is actually my father? Because I only met him briefly, and I wanted to know more about him and about his history. And the thing about this is that my cousin always told me about the Rothschild. What about the Rothschild? We heard of Rothschild. She was very poor, and she thought, our family had a connection to a Rothschild. It was like a big mystery. They were, because Rothschild considered to be very affluent, name or something. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've always been told by my mother, though I don't hear it, is that, oh, they are the von Rothschilds, and
Yeah.
we are just the poor part of the, maybe not even part of the same family, but just the Rothschilds, and
Yeah. So that was a story by itself that was going on. I heard it. So I had to go and find the Rothschild. I had to go and find that. So I started doing a research.
So
Again.
this was after you came back from Germany from the Stolperstein. So I think what are we talking about? Something like 3 years ago that you went there, or maybe it was 4. You contacted me at some point, which now I'm guessing is a year and a half, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, something
Yeah,
like that.
at least 2 years ago, if not three.
Yeah.
We can go back and look, but we left Germany in 2010. So it's been since 2010. I've been trying to find something about a relationship to my cousin and to whoever it was. When we were in Germany, at the Stolpersteiner presentation, a lady said, "Oh, they were very good friends of the Rothschilds." She knew that somehow. There's a picture of Purim. It's a Purim picture of your father and a Rothschild child. She didn't know who it was. And she sent me the picture. And we definitely should show the picture of...
Oh yes, this picture is famous.
Famous.
It seems that everybody, there are just so many people in that. Everybody that you come across, they know somebody in that photo. Of
Right.
These children. Yeah, the photographer there achieved a lot of fame.
Yes.
It's, by I think his name might be written on the actual photo.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
there seems to be. There seemed to be I mean, photography, I think, was quite a big thing in those days. Thankfully for us,
Yes.
and I think quite a lot of people employed professional photographers to come and do group pictures and stage pictures. I think the average person nowadays only has a couple of group sports photos of a. That's the only time they employ a professional. Well, nowadays everybody takes home photos, but yeah. So
And those-
so this
So
so
this
you
was...
knew something about Rothschilds. I got the impression that you only started to look for Rothschild when from that letter from Edward.
Yeah.
But you were already conscious about and had some kind of curiosity about Rothschilds. So, but you, at some point, I got the impression that you looked up, or that you saw the mention in Edward's letter about have you heard from Fritz and Edith, and you say not
Yes.
from Ellen Rothschild, and then thought, who the hell are these people, and then started to search online.
Yes.
If you had been looking before that, I mean, you then found a lot of references to Fritz, who was my mother's older brother, who had become an academic Jewish philosophy professor in New York. So he was easy to find.
Right.
And then you found, did you not, the book that I had made about my father, which mentioned my mother in a Google search.
Yes. That's the beginning of the end of the road, so to speak. Yeah. I found the thing is that always in my back of my mind, I had and I only connected it then when I started doing. I remember when your parents came to visit us in Israel when I was 4.5 or 4.
So yeah, this came later. This was not at the same moment. But just to cover the thing a bit more thoroughly. So you found references to Fritz. You contacted some professor who knew something about him, and then at one point you were trying to find out more about your father. At one point you contacted me.
I contacted you after I saw the book that you wrote. You and your sister wrote a memory of your mother's book
Are you
When,
sure? Are you sure it was that one? Because I think it was the book that I did of my father.
yes, you're
So,
right.
so
You're
it
right.
had excerpts from it. Because at that
Yeah,
point we hadn't really collated Ellen's memories into a book. But
yes.
this must have mentioned somewhere in it, and Google must have come along. I must have mentioned Ellen Rothschild as opposed to Trudy, and that she grew up in Bad Homburg. So it must have been somewhere in the book for you to find it.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I exactly knew, but there was something that made my curiosity. Just to mention that I actually, before I found you, there's another family from Bad Homburg that had the name of Rothschild, and I climbed up completely on the wrong tree, and it took a while for me to come back down to earth and realize that this is the wrong tree that I'm, because I connected to some people from that family, and there was no Alan, and there was nobody that they knew about us. So
Yeah, that's interesting. It was
yeah.
a small place. I saw in the records, yes, that there was another Rothschild family there. But from my point of view, I just remember being contacted by you because I'd just been trying to. Ellen's memories had been typed out by my sister Naomi, and I was being encouraged by another relative to try and make it into a kind of a book form. These were disjointed things. It was full of spelling corrections and so on. But I just spent some time trying to make it a little bit more like a book. I think I registered with the Library of Congress just for the sake of it, and so this was a project I just finished doing, and actually I even did that project without reading it in a lot of detail. I'd read it a few years before that in more detail, and I didn't know most of the people like you. I went through it and it mentioned names, and I just thought, well, how am I ever going to know who this person is? So you just ignored it. But when you called me, I thought, well, I got the story. Here's somebody who doesn't know anything about ancestry and this little town. And I have the perfect solution because I have a book which has, my mother talking in a cinematic way about the smells and feelings of being a child in this town. And I thought, well, that's all you're going to get out of this book. But it's better than nothing to have a smell and feeling of what childhood was like. I had no idea that there was any connection, and I can't remember exactly. But you told me that the name Ackerman, and at that time I felt like yeah, I should just have a look in the book. Maybe she mentions all sorts of people, or maybe she mentions Ackerman. And then within a couple of pages, I start seeing, best friends, their living room, what their parents were like, suddenly realizing this wasn't just a
An
superficial
occasion.
picture. Yeah, that there was a connection. This was just the beginning. But your
When I read it,
when did you I can't remember did you get I obviously sent you the book to look at. But when you read the book, was it finally the light went on? Because I think I was slower to realize that there was this big family collection than you did. Because at that point I just said, read this book.
so I at first I read and went through your father's picture book, and then I see Ellen. Because there's some pictures of her in there, and I started to make some sense of this whole thing, and then I realized that there's more to it, and somehow I saw that there is another book. I think I'm not sure.
No, I must have. It's when you contacted me. I said, "Oh, this PDF of the writing that my sister Ellen's memories. Take a look at that." So you would have read that afterwards. But now that I think about it, so we haven't really revealed that you began to realize that you had actually met my parents, and that took a while to that sink in because we were talking about Ellen Rothschild, and then suddenly it took a while for the connection to be made that Ellen she was Judy. But since I was amazed that you could remember anything from that age. But on the other hand, now that you were looking at David's book and you had actually met her when you were young, somewhere in your mind, it must have recognized the face in a way. There are pictures of Ellen since you had physically met her as a kid. It must have been sort of brewing up that there's something more to it than just the history.
No, it was for me as a child to meet them. I guess they were the first outside people out of Israel that came to visit my family, and it etches a big thing in my memory about their visit, because they came and it was a very warm feeling towards them. They took us on a trip to the north, and I do remember that trip. And I do remember a very incident that took place in a small town in Tzafat. It's a town on the hills, and there we went. Since it was a very bedtime, 1954. There was not much food in Israel, or very little special food. And we were served hot dogs, and I remember very vividly that instead of having the hot dog, I gave it to a dog, and everybody in the restaurant looked at us like, "What? He's giving the hot dog to a dog? No, it can't be. Hot dog is a precious food, at the time.
Item.
It's a luxury item. But the whole trip to the north, I remember certain things of it, like pictures of it in my memory. And it was sort of a special thing. They also, when they came, they gave us a statue of a drummer. I think you have the picture. We should put that also as well.
Yeah, African sculpture.
African sculpture, yeah. And it till today, that sculpture is sitting on the shelf in my mother's bedroom. Not bedroom, living room. And it's something that always been there. So
we got this scenario where you're learning something about your parents from her book, which is partially, what kind of place they lived in, and I think there are a few mentions about the decoration on the place, what it was like, and it didn't say that much. It was enough when you have no knowledge whatsoever about your family to get it from there. But it's only when you, I don't know if it was caused by this, or it was the same time. So you mentioned that you had met them, and I thought, well, I don't know about this. I mean, why don't I remember my parents going to Israel? And I was 2 years old, so obviously I didn't remember. And I was surprised. I thought, could my parents really leave me behind? A 2-year-old kid who looked after me, what was this all about? And so I started to look into that, and then I found somebody who was one of her friends who said, yes, you were left with my mother, and she didn't want to give you back after your parents came back. But it still was pretty vague about what was going on around that particular period. But I've put on the website. But what followed from that was, I discovered that Naomi had a whole lot of films, Super 8 movies, home movies, very, very bad quality, which had been digitized, or she digitized them also very badly. So they were really hard movies to look at and definitely not easy to enjoy. So um, when you were talking about that, I thought, well, it's now time to have a look. I had a vague memory. There are all sorts of pictures of everywhere. Europe, there are lots of African pictures, but there seemed to be a bunch of pictures on farms which looked, just what do you got? Fields and people with tractors. But there seemed to be white-skinned people doing hard work, which, if it was Africa, it would be black people. So I suddenly thought, well, maybe I should look at that again. Maybe that is actually Israel. So then when I shared this with you, we suddenly realized, absolutely, this is you as a kid, your parents, the little trip into the mountains. Um, this was quite a discovery. But I mean, that's still not the entire story. So we now have ascertained that there's this connection, that they took the trouble. I mean, so what had happened? You're talking about my mother who had escaped. What was she? 17, 18 years old.
17, 17, 18. She
Yeah,
escaped, and my father escaped also at the same time. My father escaped to Israel, and she escaped to England first. We learned it from the book. She escaped to England somehow. Her brother. There's a story about her brother and her father that you could tell the story about them going to prison.
Yeah, they were put in concentration camp and released. So they all ended up going to Africa. But when I'm now
Right.
thinking about this, your father, it appears, left. We don't have any knowledge about how on earth they got back in touch again. So Ellen leaves. She goes to England briefly. She gets a boat. She ends up with her father and brother who'd been released from concentration camp and living up near the Congo, in northern Rhodesia. And so Edmund presumably left. Well, actually, when you think about my grandmother was in touch with your grandmother even after the war had started.
Right,
You
from her
mentioned that
letters.
your grandmother committed suicide when they finally wanted to take her away to my grandmother got sent to and her sister got sent to Lodz ghetto. So presumably Ellen and your father got in touch simply because her mother somewhere must have mentioned, oh, Edmund has left and this is where he's living in Israel. So I'm thinking the two of them ran away, and then suddenly we discover after the war, 1954, they're in touch again and they go to visit, they come to visit.
Well, maybe it was actually through the war that they got. We have letters. We do have letters between my father anyway, writing to your mother.
Yeah,
In
we do.
1944,
Yeah, well, no, we
1943.
definitely have 44. We actually, I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think there are one or two letters where he wrote to her in Africa before, in the early part of the war.
Right,
39 maybe,
39.
or maybe
Yeah.
maybe 40, because he's talking about his life in the kibbutz and his idealism and so on. But yeah, so what the next kind of level of things that gets revealed is the personality and so on of your father through this bunch of letters which I discover. So
And for me, this was a revelation, and it was sort of something that I always wanted to find out, because through the letters you could see who was the man, and I never had a chance to know. I never had a chance. I knew he was a very gentle, and kind of person, and you can see it through the videos. I'm actually sitting on his lap in the video that your mother, that and he, one of the memories that I have of him is that he used to take me to the kids' house at night and put me to sleep, because on kibbutz in those days the kids were sleeping separate from the parents in a kid's house, and every night the parents would bring the kids to the kids' house and maybe sit on their bed for a while and then leave and have all kinds of other activities at night. But I do remember that he brought me to the kids' house every night, because at the time my mother was involved with a group of kids that she was the caretaker. So she was taking care of other kids, and my father would take me to the kids' house every night. So there were fun memories of him, but it was all cut in 1955. Yeah.
So yes, he died. Do you remember much about when he died? I mean, do you remember his your feelings as a kid? I mean, you presumably in a kibbutz you have a lot of support from a lot of different people. So
yes, we did. I was told nothing about his death, and all of a sudden we drove to some friends of ours in Tel Aviv, friends of my parents. It's the sister of one of her best friends in Tel Aviv. As a matter of fact, this couple actually had something to do with the Eichmann trial in '63. The husband was the photographer for the trials, but that's a different story. But we were taken to me and a friend who was my best friend at the time. Were taken to their house, and then we stayed. I guess we stayed for the we stayed in Tel Aviv for the funeral and for the beginning of, this kind of a mess, I would call it, where my father died, and then I guess the burial. He was very, very well loved by kibbutz, by people on the kibbutz. He was considered to be a very useful member of the kibbutz, very, I guess, loved by members at the time. I came back to the kibbutz, and I ended up in my parents' room, just with my mother, and she was crying and tried to explain to me, and I couldn't comprehend exactly that my father was no longer dead, and it was a very, very emotional time. I was only 5, so I guess it did not comprehend, but I didn't see him after that.
Did you you mentioned that you moved after that point? How long was it before you came to the USA?
Oh, we moved to the USA in when I was 15. Much later.
So you were still in a place where, the echoes of your father passing from that period took quite a while. You were still surrounded by people that you knew and who knew him.
Oh yeah. I was I was in kindergarten, and maybe 3 years later, my adopted father came into my family. The American Manny, who basically adopted all of us. We became his children, and even got his name, Erez. No longer have a
Ackerman.
Ackerman, yeah. And
So you had quite a while. I mean, again, trying to picture in my mind the image that you have of your father. Um, I just wonder. You had quite a number of years where people who knew him pretty well related to you as a kid. Presumably, they painted a picture of what you should be based on what they thought your father was, that kind of thing. So there's a certain amount of an image that is left behind of him that you picked up.
yes, exactly. There was a guy who was also in the British Brigade, in the Jewish Brigade under the British, who actually was a captain, and he would tell me stories about my father, and he was a strange kind of guy, but he considered himself like, I'm a captain, or he had actually, and he would tell me also on the side, he would tell me stories about my father. And so my father became like a mystery, kind of a mystical personality.
Yeah.
And that's-
Did you get? So you get quite a lot of his personality from these letters that we've found where he's writing to my mother. Did you get any kind of from the other letters that you got from Edward when he came to the USA? Those, the one letter that you shared with me was the one which mentioned the Rothschilds.
Yes.
But of the previous letters, did you get an impression of any kind of a picture of what Edward is like as a person from those letters?
Not so much from the letters, but from what my cousin was telling me. And the letters actually did say something about him. The letters showed a little bit of like a sleazy kind of person, because the way he was talking about ladies a little bit.
Yeah.
So it was not a surprise for me to hear that your mother, in her book, writes about him not in the most fondly way.
Yeah, well, when I saw that at the time, once I started looking in the book, and I wasn't quite sure who was who, and then I thought maybe she's just been backbiting and so on. She says nasty things about this guy, and I'm thinking, is that just her being, bitchy? And is it really fair? And you said, no, this is fair, and I was quite surprised. I think she mentioned sort of something about him not paying for a hotel. And she somehow, the two of them, he writes what's happened to, maybe he didn't mention Ellen Rothschild in that letter because maybe he had been in touch with her a little bit. But then
and he knew about her.
If he had, how did she know about him? And if he had been in touch with her, wouldn't he have simply asked her what's happened to your brother and your sister? So it
doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense. I don't. Maybe he wasn't too fond of her, so he didn't want to. Although he mentioned the Rothschild as if they were like gods, or
disconnected.
Yeah.
But, you know, he clearly, if you ask the question, have you heard from them, it sounds like he hasn't been in touch. But, you know, if obviously 1954, hang on, let's just get the timing right. 1954, Ellen probably heard something about him from your father, or we don't see many letters or communication between your mother after that point and my mother.
Somehow,
Maybe she did inform them about some of uh, the stories with him. But
maybe, maybe. The thing is that we lost contact with Edmund. My mother actually got a letter from him.
Edward, Edward, you mean.
Edward. So Edward.
Yeah.
My mother got a letter from him, or saying that he's sorry about my father's death, and he would like actually to bring it to the U.S. and help her, and possibly, according to the Jewish law, you're supposed to marry your brother's wife, or something like this, or do something about. So it sounded like he obviously was concerned about her, and he wanted to help, but actually, in reality, he was the poorest of the poor, and he most likely was a drug addict at the time, and he was lying from his, all the letters that he wrote were completely false.
Yeah.
The letters that he wrote, he wrote a letter about that he has a daughter, and he's very happy with his wife and all that. It turned it out to be that he was completely. He had a very sad ending, which he ended up being a drug addict, according to my cousin, and he was shooting heroin, and one time he ended up doing too much, and his wife basically got rid of him. He ended up leaving somewhere. We were looking for him for a long time. I think I found some notes that he ended up in a veteran hospital in New York, and in 1966 or 62, I forget exactly, he passed away and was buried.
I noticed in one or two of these photos. We should talk a little bit about the photos as well, but there are a couple of pictures of him where there's a group shot, and he's got his head down like this. It's interesting to see
Yes.
as a kid that he has
Yes.
his some kind of shyness or something.
Yes.
The photos. So what I've done recently, because of Stolperstein, Bad Homburg, putting on a memorial quite soon for the Rothschilds. So I've been participating by digging through all these old photos and recovering 100-year-old photos and faded, destroyed prints, and trying to make them. Well, we're putting on an exhibition, but I've been looking very closely at a lot of these photos, and I must say, I sort of once you realize and you're recognizing people, it's kind of embarrassing, really, that it took you 2 months looking at these photos before you started to be able to recognize faces. Are you that slow? But nonetheless, now through looking at all of these photos so often, I'm building more of a picture of the life, and it seems that the Ackermans and the Rothschilds were everywhere. together. I mean, there's just a picture that I've got from Austria, a big kind of family grouping, and there's your grandfather. Um, I mean, so this isn't just local events and local kind of um, local things going on and the kids playing together. This, to take a trip to Austria together is again,
It's
this connection I think
it
goes
seemed
back.
like it seemed like because they live on the same street, and because the fact that they were in the same profession. My grandfather was into shoes in some ways. He was in charge. He had a store for leather goods store, and
Yeah.
your father and your grandfather was selling shoes.
Well, that's definitely that was close. But I thought, I can't remember where it was. I think there were some records of the two families being part of the same kind of a group, going back even to the kind of great grandparents or something. That there was a connection of going back a long way. So you've discovered quite a long connection with that part of Germany and your family. Um, and I think further back then, I think the earliest that I've got on any of the family records, it's not even in Bad Homburg area, but I think it's 1860 is the earliest mention that I have. But you've connected to family members go back even further than that.
Yes, we actually went to visit my great grandfather's house in, I forget the name of the city, but very close to Bad Homburg. And they took us and showed us the house. And I through the internet, I got connection to some cousins that actually did the same kind of route. Found, and it's all merged into this great great grandfather. And I believe that the Ackerman family started like 13th century in Germany, something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, and from what I've been gathering in recent times, I'm quoting somebody from a YouTube discussion who said that, it's unusual for German families, Jewish families, to trace their ancestors back more than 200 years in one go, because many of these states kicked out the Jews every now and again. And I did a little bit of research, and obviously Germany wasn't one place. Germany was many different areas, principalities, and certainly the ones towards the east kicked out the Jews more frequently than the ones on the western side. And it seems, I always had my mother making uncorroborated statements about we've been 1,000 years in Germany. I mean, I don't know where she could get that from. But the interesting thing, I'm beginning to build a picture, and presumably the same thing, as to what was life like in those days. There's definitely there's an awful lot of emphasis on Jewish activity, religious stuff. At the same time, there are loads of references I'm seeing to people who are living just as Germans first and then Jews second. And you hear that about Berlin, but I never really built a picture about that in that area. On the other, but also I'm getting a picture that Germany was known to be a very cultured place with highly educated people. And that, at least in our family, you look at your father's letters and so on, it sounds as if these were clear-thinking, interested, curious, intellectually competent people going back generations. That there was certainly quite a lot of that, I mean, I suppose, actually, to contradict that, my mother describes her father as being a bit of an oaf, not that he married a woman who was highly intellectual and educated and spoke lots of languages, and that he was a bit of a yeah, well, oafish guy. But it still seems as if there was access to a kind of the intellectual climate. It wasn't as if in some of those places where you would say, well, if you are part of an underclass, you don't read learned books, you don't read philosophy, that kind of a thing. It seems that our background there was, in a way, probably for the period, incredibly privileged. I mean, they may not have been upper class and super rich, but they certainly strikes me as being very educated and worldly, should I say.
Well, I would say not necessarily through education, because my father ended at the age of 16, leaving the school. Not They were forced out of school. If the same thing with your mother, they didn't finish high school because of the fact that they were Jews, and they were kicked out of their regular school, and they ended up doing. I guess he was sent to a only Jewish kids school, and they were doing a lot of manual. I would say, what's the word I'm looking for? Metalwork and all kinds of. He was learning, because there's pictures of him doing that, and I know that the schools became more of a profession, not necessarily education, high education. And then he moved to Israel, and in Israel he for at least for 2 years, 16, 17, or 18. He was on kibbutz, and actually they worked. I mean, they studied for a couple of hours, and then they worked for the rest of the time. But he got enough education, but not.
Well, you read his letters, and he is a guy who's wanders about the world. He's philosophically open-minded, and he seems. Well, what I meant by education wasn't really formal education. What I meant was that these people sounded smart. For example, I'm not entirely sure because I know very little about it, but I get the impression that some of my father's family, that these people would be incurious about the world, that they were peasants. They might have capabilities and so on, but they were not really wondering about why we exist on the planet. I get a lot of the impression from some of the letters of my father's family that, yes, they might have been religious, and I'm not sure whether the religion they were interested in actually encouraged them to think about stuff. It seemed to me a lot of the time it was just very ritualistic. But I didn't get the impression that they thought about, you can say a war situation and becoming displaced as a young person is going to make you think about life and philosophy and so on. But there are lots of people who are displaced and who don't become smart just because they're put into difficult situations. I mean, some people just become animals, and they live on the survival and
of the fittest.
They don't think about anything. It's just basically so.
My father was joined this youth movement, who not forced but promoted higher education, highly thinking, and thinking about who you are, what's your purpose in life, and higher value to life. Kibbutz was the all-in-all way of living, joining a communal living together and helping each other. I guess there was a lot of Marx and Lenin all kinds of other people that came to their knowledge. Maybe now it's considered to be a foo-foo, but at the time it was the thing that inspired people to learn about life and learn about.
Well, it's to be philosophical. I'm
Yeah.
smiling because I found, I don't know if I kept it, but I found a copy of Das Kapital. You know, my father, who brought almost nothing, and my mother at least brought a few boxes of things out of Germany with her, and a sewing machine and that kind of thing. So the bits and pieces that she had. But yeah, he brings this big Das Kapital, and I look in it, it's stolen from the Warsaw Library. Thinking this is. I don't think I ever remember him hearing anything about that. But yeah, it was. Well, I think the thing that's interesting to me is that when you have wars and displacement and so on, you know, I remember, just getting philosophical for a second, I remember talking to somebody in Zimbabwe. I didn't fight in the war of independence or for or against the whites. I just basically didn't want to do the army. I was a young kid and I ran off to Europe. And this one of my school pals had fought, and he'd become disillusioned with he became disillusioned with the white cause, and he became disillusioned with the Christianity. He was a priest in the army and so on. And I said to him, well, you know, one thing that I missed was the humanity. I mean, it's discontinuity in my life. I left the country and I didn't experience what happens to people in a war to learn the lessons that. And he got very angry and he said, you missed nothing. Nobody learns anything from war. You know, it's basically, you know, there's entirely negative effects. There isn't some kind of hidden glory or human courage or something that comes out. But I mean, using that as an example, I'm thinking that, oh, we have this messy past, all these people run away, there was death and destruction. It's kind of like it's all trauma, forget the whole thing. It's all just you looking back over history, and you have no sense of anything intelligent that happened in the past. Just forget it all. And yet somehow, with all this little adventure and, you know, checking, you finding out more about your father is that it's very interesting, which is that no, it wasn't just a mess. There were, you know, intelligent people, inquiring people, you know, there was hope, there was a life back through all of this.
Well, for him, I don't know if you know it. Let's go back and talk about him, which I did a little bit of search. He first joined a unit which is called the German unit in the British, so-called British Army in 1944 or 43. The British organized this group of German descent folks, and they, I think I told you about that. They actually wanted them to be saboteurs in over the lines in Germany. And
no. What I understood from what you said was that they thought that Rommel might conquer Palestine, and they wanted some people who could spy. But I didn't realize they were looking for saboteurs as well.
They're looking for saboteurs, and actually, they had some cases of people that they actually did that, and so they jumped over the German lines in Europe, and that was the German unit. They were trained in Israel, actually, in a camp that was secluded, and he was drafted for this unit in 1944 or 1943, I forget exactly, and was actually spent most of his days in this camp that only spoke German, dressed up in German clothes, German army clothes, used German machine guns, and they were supposed to practice being totally Germans, and then they were supposed to be infiltrate into the German army and or jump over the lines. There's a famous name, Hannah Senish, who actually did that and actually was kidnapped. She actually jumped in Hungary and was captured by the Germans. She was well known, but they never got the chance to do it. But to be able to continue their service to the Israeli cause, they actually joined together as a group into the Jewish Brigade. Yeah, and then ended up in the Italian campaign, and then going all the way to Germany. And one of the things that my father did is, at the end of the war, not only he had a chance to help DP camp people immigrant to Israel, but also he went and visited Bad Homburg. And we actually have a picture that he took, picture of your family's house, right? And
Yeah.
picture of my family's house. And on top, you can actually see that it was actually taken by somebody else, but it's the same house. That's actually another thing that I did, is I recognize from this album some pictures of his house, and I went to some pictures on the internet, and I found it's basically the same marking on the house, and I kind of connected that to a real house that he actually took a picture way back in 1945.
Yeah, well,
And I
we've got
believe-
this, but we also have a bunch of letters. I'll probably read some of this. Maybe I could read some of the words of his letter and put it into this video. But
Yeah,
where he goes back to Bad Homburg and he writes to Ellen about his impressions and experience and who he saw, and I think those are pretty revealing couple of letters. Which
Yes,
I've put
yes.
on the. But you have. It's funny. I have some of the pictures that he sent to Ellen, and you have copies of them. The bombed out Germany, and exactly the same photos between the two of them. It's
it's kind of funny that you had some of these pictures and I had some of these pictures, and when we looked at them, they were the same pictures.
Yeah.
And this is. I want to go back, and I think that actually my father revealed in one of the letters that he actually was very fond of your mother, and it was more than that. I think
well,
it
they
was,
went to school arm in arm together. I
Right.
think he definitely jokes. I think the thing is that probably were it not for the war, were it not for the fact that they already ended up in different countries and ended up already married themselves, that I think he's joking that they should have got married. Or normally things might have done if it had been. Well, one wonders what might have happened if there wasn't a Hitler, if there wasn't a war.
yeah. Who
You know,
knows?
German. Quite
Assimilated.
well, also, but quite parochial. I mean, you think in terms of my grandmother and her sister. They ended up marrying two brothers.
Yeah.
So my mother is this cousin Helmut, who's a double cousin, and it was partially simply because in modern society, the desire exchange your genes for somebody completely different. You know, you might Caucasian might marry Chinese or African or something like that for variety, but there it was simply a question of, oh, who's up the road, who can I marry, who's just accessible.
Not
But I
only
mean,
that, yeah.
but I mean, I think actually, you know, that's probably a throw off from what was it? I saw some statistics that somebody quoted, or at least an opinion about a few hundred years ago in Britain, that the average person never traveled more than 15 miles, 20 kilometers from where they were born. So obviously you're going to get married to somebody other who lives next door or 3 houses along from you, if that's
Right.
the case. But yeah, what would have happened had not been the case? Yeah, maybe they would have got married. Don't see why not. I mean, certainly, it's funny looking at the photos. You know, this life seemed to be. Well, I see them all on picnics together. I
Yes.
see Ellen talking about the joy of nature and the trees and so on and so forth. It's, you know, a lot of people have looked at it and said that they had a kind of an idyllic childhood. I mean, it was a real childhood.
Up to a certain date where
Yeah.
the German, yeah. Interesting enough, I wanted to. There's a picture of my father, very young, and a dog, and your uncle together, if you remember.
Yeah,
And my father was very fond of dogs. I mean, as far as I remember, we had a dog in the family, and my father brought the dog. So that's something that I am discovering right now, that it's not just something that started in Palestine or in Israel. It's something
Yeah.
that I think something that started way back. I don't
well,
recall it.
I see no record of Ellen having a dog. It's not mentioned anywhere. And that picture was out in the forest, and that must have been your dog, one presumes, or at least your family's dog. I mean, Ellen, after she got to Africa, always had dogs. That became a big thing. But prior to that, in her childhood, there's no mention whatsoever of a
Of a
dog.
dog.
But
I think it's
yeah.
mentioned. I think it's mentioned in somewhere that my family had a dog. My grandfather and mother. She mentioned it. I think it's in the book that
Yeah.
they had a dog. But there you go. You discover things like that through.
Well, you know, what started out as me, this is this whole story about our connection. What started out with me saying, I've got all this stuff, you know, all this crap, all these letters and stuff, all this history. There's Benny comes along and he says, I don't know anything about my family. And I think, you know, I just share all this stuff that I've got. You know, sort of, I'm the giver and not the explorer. But in the process of going through all of this stuff, I've become an explorer as well. You know, there's loads of stuff to. So
Check.
it's really a kind of a common journey, really, of trying to find identity. It's not just simply, well, you know, I'll find another letter that mentions your family. It becomes
discovering yourself.
incredibly intriguing and. Yeah, I don't know what to make of. I mean, I lived when I left Africa. I went to Europe, and I concluded that I don't like you know, all these Europeans. They like all this old shit, you know, old buildings, old records, old documents, and so on. You know, this is sort of, there's something creepy about looking backwards. Yeah, so I mean, that's not my natural upbringing to be interested in history and background, but it's certainly been pretty exciting digging through all these bits and pieces. Yeah, so
Got
anyway.
interesting. Yeah, the one thing that I regret is that I didn't do it earlier. And up till 1970, when did your mother die? 1970,
No, it was after that. No, she was,
1990,
that's around that, yeah. I
yeah,
forgot.
1995, or that. It's so close. I could have connected
Yeah.
to people that actually knew my father, and it's a shame that I didn't do this research
Well, it's not just
earlier.
you. It's not
Yeah.
just you. Had I known about the Ackermans, I mean, I thought the reason that I didn't really suspect anything was because, so my father never talked anything about his past. But my mother brought me up as a little kid, and she even writes in the book that she used to tell me stories about her outings in Germany and so on, and that I went to hear the story again and again, and she was sick of telling me the same story. But she certainly told me endless stories about her childhood and snow and all these exotic things in her background. So I figured that I'd heard everything. I at least got a flavor of every part of her story. I had no flavor whatsoever of no mention really about who they
Ackerman.
visited in Israel. That part of the connection somehow that never got through to me. So I would have liked to also ask her. I mean, she definitely would have been able to give us a huge amount of
Information.
background. And I'm also thinking, really, when you look at those movies about David and Ellen visiting Israel and with your father in it, I suppose they were a little bit of idealists. Of course, they went to Africa. They were doing quite well, making a life for themselves and making a new business. And he was a very flexible guy, so he was kind of heroic in his own way. But he hadn't done anything that much. I think I'm trying to imagine what, looking at the movie, you see him and my father walking up. And you look, Ellen and Edmund shared a childhood, so they have plenty to talk about. My father's the outsider coming
Yeah.
on this little trip. He obviously
Right.
took a few of the photos. But at the same time, the things that Edmund had done during the war and so on, these made everything that my father did look like nothing. It must have been pretty interesting for him also on that particular trip.
To talk to my father.
Yeah, and I think it must have been inspiration or something.
At some point, it seemed like they were considering. At least my father was in the letters saying you should come and live in Israel.
Yeah, he was definitely talking about that, and there was a little bit of idealism at one point with my mother. That was very early on, where she was talking about having David and her having an idea about going to Israel. I think she's complaining that Walter Hollander was the one who stopped that.
Yeah, convinced them not to go.
Yeah, or messed things up with the authorities or something like that. But yeah, anyway, so I think we should.
Yeah, I think that we covered a lot,
Yeah,
but the most important is to know that yes, there is a connection between the two families way back. Really a deep connection. They did a lot of things together. There's many pictures of them together. I discovered that in this booklet here is basically about your family and my and some a little bit about my family. There are pictures of your grandfather, of your grandmother, of Ellen, more than my parents, and
Yeah.
more than my grandparents, or equally. So I don't know who made this booklet, but it reveals the connection that I didn't know who those people were. And after a long search, all of a sudden, every one of these photos is somebody who has connection. And that,
Yeah, and it's
that is,
incredible that,
yeah,
you know, if I'm correct, that this is 70 years worth of, at least in your mind and my mind, that there was no longer any, this was just a forgotten connection.
yes,
That
yes.
somehow or other from the time when your father died,
It's kind of severed.
that it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just as if it never happened. And
Yeah, and now we're reconnecting and making this. We're going to make this trip again together. We actually going to see each other in person for the first time, and it's going to be in relationship to your mother, and it's going to be actually exciting to.
well, it'll be interesting
go-
to see also there. I don't know if there are any people who will come out of the corners now because time is going, but definitely one guy who knew Fritz announced to the Stolperstein people that he would like to connect because
Oh, really?
I think you mentioned that there are a couple of people who came along who suddenly said, "Oh, I knew your grandfather," or you know, some. So we'll see whether there are any other little pieces of thread that come together when we
come
go
to-
there.
Yeah.
Probably some old person come crawling up to us and say,
I used to know. Yeah. It's actually quite interesting. You know, when I first went to Germany, I was afraid of every old person because I was afraid that they were Nazis, related to the Nazis. But later on, I learned that very good people, very nice people, and
Well, I know. My mother is somehow or other. So there's that thing from Helmut, which I put on the website, a newspaper cutting. Where he says, "I have no hate." Well, you know, his father was murdered in the concentration camp, and but
yes,
he's this is it's almost like his the length of the history overruled what the hell the Nazis did. In other words, it's kind of like it's a little blip. But I get the impression that because of this turbulent history in a lot of parts of Germany, is that there have always been people who considered themselves not to be. The majority of the time, everybody considers themselves to be a kind of not so much oppressed, but really not the people who are in charge. That it's always kind of ducking and diving because some other army is going to come over the horizon and they're going to tell you this or they're going to tell you that, and you're constantly trying to survive. That an awful lot of Germans are kind of anti-establishment. That this strange thing that happened, there were an awful lot of people who were against the Nazis, but somehow it all got swept away. But that this is not the default. The default was really that everybody was, we're against the powers that be, and we're the little guys fighting for freedom. This sort of concept is deeper than the domination trip that the Nazis took. So anyway.